Hello, good afternoon to everyone. Like for all those who are joining us for today's second session of the Art of Storytelling for freelancers and creators, you're officially welcome to this glorious afternoon. So we're going to make it quite quick. I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of activities to do, so we're just going to go straight to the point and continue from there. So last 2 weeks we started with our first session, and the activity and the focus for the first session was basically an introduction to the course, and we explored the topic of this masterclass or the purpose of the masterclass, why storytelling is so important, the qualities of a good story, and how to be a good storyteller. So we explored most of these things in a PowerPoint presentation. I'm sure most of you who have watched the video on YouTube are quite conversant with what we explored. So basically, that's for that one. Then at the end of the class or the session, I gave a few assignments that so I gave you two short stories to actually look at and tell us some of the characteristics of the stories, because in the first session we explored that a good story have certain characteristics. So the short story that I gave you was more like a weekly hurdle, and your single assignment was to actually kind of like find out the characteristics that are embedded in the stories, and that's the assignment for the week. And unfortunately, a lot of people couldn't make it, so we're going to go through that one quickly. Then we'll move on to our session for today, the second session for today, what we'll look at, and we'll continue from there. So I gave you two stories. The first story was called Eugenia. Eugenia is quite a fantasy, magical, realistic kind of story. That was written by myself, actually. Eugenia is an amazing and interesting story because it talks about the relationship between an artist and his supernatural beloved, like the kind of relationship between a spirit and a human. And in the story, you get to realize that the two share this irrevocable bond to the extent that when the artist in time gets to acquaint himself with another lady, the spirit becomes jealous and unveils the secret of the reason why the artist is one of the greatest, because the spirit actually infused the artist with creativity and dexterity, and that's an interesting story. I feel it's an interesting story by all standards, and we actually want to look at some of the characteristics of the stories that will be like about from the PowerPoint presentation. That we said, what are some of the characteristics of a good story? There are certain characteristics. So from the Eugenia story, what are some of the characteristics of a good story in the Eugenia story? That's what we are looking at quickly. Then move on to the next story. Then we'll hopefully do what this week session is basically about. So the qualities of a good story. So yeah, Eugenia was intriguing, was suspensional, there was tension, there was climax, there was unpredictability. Because mostly, if you have read Eugenia, the one I shared to you, you get to realize that we didn't expect that, we didn't know what was going to happen, whether the guy was going to leave the room, because the spirit said if you leave the room you're not going to win this competition. So like that's for that. And it was also well structured. It was like, yeah, it evoked a lot of emotions. You get to see how painful it was for you to love someone so much and the person leaves you for another person. That basically construct. Then we didn't get a resolution because we felt like the story ended up in space. So these are some of the few characteristics of the Jenna story, and that was quite interesting and amazing. So in case you haven't had time to go through, kindly find time and go through the Jenna story. It's an interesting story, and hopefully you can look at it later. Next, we also want to look at the other story. I actually give two stories, Jenna and complicated story, a complicated story. So a complicated story was also another interesting story that explored the complexity of the relationship between a guy and a lady, and what actually caused the abrupt consistency of their love. Something is happening to the lady, and the lady hasn't come to herself to know that I don't know what happened to him when I tell him about my situation. It's going to break his heart, but it's not really about that one. And that becomes the element of complication in the story. But the truth of the matter is that whatever happens, whatever was taking the lady's life actually is unveiled, and we get to realize that she's actually dying, and that's the reason for the complication in the story. So that is also another interesting piece of story, a complicated story indeed. So the lady was actually dying. She didn't come to bring herself to tell the guy that this is actually what's happened to me. And I don't she actually has no idea what happened to him if she told him that this was happening. I'm about to die. The guy loves her so much, and amazingly that the complication of the story. So that's also a complicated story. And if you have not found time to read it, hopefully you want to do that one quickly. So one of the some of the qualities of this complicated story were actually there was intrigue. Yeah, it was intriguing because mostly we don't really know what's happening because the lady was talking about something, but we didn't know what that thing was. Then there was suspense, there was tension, there was climax. Mostly there was unpredictability. No one of us was expecting that she was going to die anyway, and it was well structured. It was definitely more researched, and it evoked also a lot of emotion. So that's some of the few characteristics you can also look at here for a complicated story. So kindly find time if you have not done so, and hopefully go through this amazing story. It's basically the foundation of storytelling, and I know it's going to be awesome for you. So now I want to move on to our main focus for today. So according to our curriculum structure, we have for session 2, which is 22nd October, which is today, we're going to look at turning facts into fiction. So that's the main topic or focus of discussion today, turning fact into fiction. And in breaking it down, we're going to look at where does ideas come from, the discipline of research, moving from known to unknown. And basically that's going to be what we're going to discuss for today's session, turning fact into fiction. Now, just to say and to elaborate, I just want to say that every idea for every story is actually has this crucible of reality or fact. Even though most of the stories that we tell are fiction, most of the fictional stories that we tell have their origin from true activities or true circumstances or true situations that actually happen. And that's the premise for what we're going to discuss today. And it was mostly it's all about things that are happening around us. They are the things that we actually use to write stories. Even though most of the things in the stories are not totally true, what actually incited the story was a true activity. So that is the idea of turning facts into fiction. So that's where ideas come from. Where does idea come from? Ideas come from all around us. Ideas are all around us. You know, circumstances are pots of ideas. When you are excited, it could be an idea you want to write about something. When you're sad, you can write about it. When something good happens to a friend, you can write about it. If something bad happens to a friend, you can also write about it. So ideas are all around us. Everything that gives you the opportunity to rethink circumstance or life is capable to being an idea that you can build up into a story. So ideas are all around us. Basically, in The Raven, which I wrote, that most of the ideas of The Raven came from Black Panther. When I watched a movie in 2018, initially I didn't believe that Africans can write science fiction stories and explore so much technology. So when I watched the movie, I was like, finally, what I needed is finally here. So that is it. So the idea for Black Panther was, for The Raven was actually from Black Panther. I wanted something that would give me the motivation that yes, it's possible for Black people to write science fiction stories. So that is for so ideas come from every situation, good, bad situations, you know, things that happen all around us, things, dreams that you have, things that you hear from church. They are all a crucible of ideas that you can explore in other you do. Then hopefully when you have gotten the idea, the other thing is that you want to do some research because that's one of the things in storytelling that's like really explored. So for the kind of as a science fiction writer, you can't write science fiction just because you have an idea of building something. You need to do the research. If you look at the Raven, there's so much research that went into the Raven. I believe it's part of the writing process. Growing up as a young kid, I didn't know the aspect of creative writing. I felt so far as you have an idea, you can just go on and write. But sometimes you need to do research. If you're going to create an engineer, you need to know what engineers do. how they work, the kind of work engineers do. You're going to create a biotechnologist. You need to know who a biotechnologist is, what kind of work they do as a biotech scientist. If you are going to create a, a relationship between two people, you need to actually have a fair idea of what people do in a relationship. You're going to create a family life. You're going to really want to know how husbands and wife relate with their children. So basically, to the discipline of research is indispensable in storytelling. You don't just write because you have an idea. You also have to do research to find the verity of what you are trying to tell. Because trust me, some people are very, very intelligent, and when they read your work and they feel it's not well researched, they will, in some cases, castigate your work. They'll feel like you have done a shoddy work. And in order to, not to encounter all those kind of things, it's only good that you do your research well, so that you have done an excellent work, so that anyone who picks up your work says this is quality work. And that's something that has inspired me. That's something that actually inspired the Raven. When you look at the Raven, you get to see that there was a lot of research, and I'm so proud of the Raven even till now. The final one is, so mostly in the process of turning fact into fiction, you want to move from the known to the unknown. Mostly when you are telling a story, you don't have everything that you want to write about in the beginning, because mostly when you start writing, you start with an idea, you get a picture in your mind. So you just have a fair idea of what's going to happen in the first two, three chapters. What's going to happen in the 22nd and 23rd chapter, you don't know. But what you need to believe and trust yourself is that so far as you have a solid idea, you move with it. As you tell the story, circumstances will evolve new ideas. Mostly, for example, if you're telling the story of wait, so like yeah, basically that's as I was saying earlier. So it's always that way. You don't really have a fair idea of everything that you want to write about, but so far as you have a fair idea of where you are going, you just have to trust the process and continue writing. And mostly that's for the Raven. When I was writing the Raven, I had a fair idea of just a story about a young lady who had the ability to fly, has dexterous ability with combat, bow and arrow most definitely. But I didn't know how the story was going to evolve into, how the story is going to continue up to the end. But I just trusted my instinct that I've written a love story, so at least I can maneuver my way out. When I get to any point, I can know how the whole process works out. So basically, that's for me, and that's how I was able to excellently and brilliantly complete the Raven. So it's all those things. So you have to trust the process. You always have to move from the known to the unknown in your storytelling process. And trust me, it's going to get awesome and get incredible. So basically, that is all that we have for today. So I'm going to give another assignment, or what we call a weekly hurdle for today. You are most definitely. So here you're going to. I'm going to give you a premise, and you're going to create a short story from it. And hopefully, I want to see how you are. You're going to use that idea that I'm going to give you to create a story in just no more than 3 pages. No more than 3 pages, Mr. No more than 3 pages. No more than 3 pages. So you're going to create a story based on what I'm going to give you a premise in your email. I'm going to send it to your email so that at least you have an idea of how the story is going to be like. And try and create a story with that idea in 3 pages. That idea in 3 pages. And I'd like to see what you can create from it based on all the things you've learned today, turning fact into fiction. Yeah, so in this case, you're not going to create the idea. I'm going to give you the idea. Then you're supposed to just create a story, a short story in 3 pages from that idea. And trust me, I know it's going to be interesting and awesome. Yeah, so that is that for today. That's that for today. Yeah, that's that for today. So that is the end of our class for today. Hopefully, for all who are able to join us, I'm sure this has been helpful. And for all those who are not able to join us, I'm going to upload it on YouTube so that you have the time to go through and learn for your own self. Thank you all for your time and have a blessed week. I'm going to upload the weekly hurdle too. So, as most of you who are going to be available, you can also find time and go through it and learn for yourself. I wish you all the best in this week and have a glorious weekend. Bye bye.